Well, it's 12:01 and it looks like for the most part, we've got folks on joining here. So I will start the program today. Welcome everybody. My name is Maya Swope and I am the Outreach and Volunteer Coordinator here at Friends of the Boundary Waters Wilderness. Really excited that you are all joining us this afternoon. We've got a great presentation with Clare Shirley. I know she's excited to give you some background about what she does as an outfitter and answer any questions that folks have. I did wanted to start off by kind of bringing up some breaking news that we are just hearing about out this morning. So the Minnesota State Supreme Court issued a decision today at 10 a.m. just a few hours ago on the polymet case. And this is a pretty complicated decision. Our lawyers are still analyzing it. But the overview that is that it's a really big win for us. It's a big win for those of us fighting for clean water, for folks that live up in the area near Polymet in Duluth, Fond du Lac. So it's really exciting. Basically, the court upheld the decision to strike down Polymet's permit to mine, which means that there is no permit right now. They have to start the process over. And the Supreme Court basically agreed that it doesn't make any common sense to have a permit with no term limit and no end date. And said that they will have to resubmit that permit, which is really great for those of us fighting the mine. We also will get to have a trial before an administrative law judge, which is one of the main things we've been asking for. And it'll require that the Department of Natural Resources review the question of whether a layer of bentonite is a reasonable way to hold back pollution forever, which is something that Polymet has never tried before, but wanted to kind of try out on this project. And so that contested case hearing will allow us to really bring some more science and evidence into this case and hopefully be able to prove our point that that is not a safe way to operate and that this mine should not be in operation. So we are having a press conference today at 1 p.m. that will have some experts giving some more details about what that means for the future of the fight against Polymet. So that will be live in person at the steps of the Capitol building in St. Paul. Also on the St. Louis County Courthouse steps in Duluth. And that will be also streaming live on our Friends of the Boundary Waters Facebook page. So if you are in St. Paul and want to join or in Duluth, you're welcome to come on down at 1 p.m. Otherwise, check out our Facebook live stream for kind of those details. And then as we have more of a chance to kind of digest what this means, we are going to be having a presentation next Wednesday with our lawyer, Evan Nelson from Maslin, who's kind of been the lead on this case. And so he'll be giving a presentation next week, Wednesday, on some of the details of what this actually means and what it actually will look like for us. So a little bit later, I'll put a link in the chat to make sure you're signed up for that. So exciting news. It's a big day for us, and wanted to thank all of you for being involved in this fight with us. It's been a long time coming. There's still a lot more work to do, but it's a exciting moment, and so thank you for being part of that with us. Wanted to switch gears a little bit and introduce our presenter today. So Clare Shirley is the owner and operator of Sawbill Canoe Outfitters. She's a third generation. It's been in her family for a while and kind of an expert on a lot of things outfitting, boundary waters, and is really excited to share some of those stories and ideas with you about what it's like to be an outfitter. I know I've seen some folks who have questions already. If anyone does have other questions throughout the presentation, you can enter it. There's a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those towards the end. If anyone has technical issues or other things like that, feel free to message me in the chat, and I can try to get that sorted out. So that's all I had to say for now. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Clare.
Hey, thank you, Maya, and thanks for giving that little rundown on the Supreme Court decision. It's a big deal, and I'm really looking forward to tuning in to the press conference. I won't make it to St. Paul or Duluth. I'm too far away, but I look forward to tuning into that. So that'll be fun to hear more about, and certainly a big day. So we can take some of that positive energy now and talk a little bit about the boundary waters. So I like to be here to serve as sort of a link to the place that we're all fighting so hard to protect, and just chat a little bit about it. So I'm going to talk for a little while. I'll give a little brief history of Sawbill and my family's history here, kind of what we do, what it's like to be an outfitter and to live up here. But I would love to answer questions. So everything's on the table. Ask away. Ask about, what it's like to be here. Questions about the Boundary Waters or trip planning or anything like that. It's all fair game. So shoot them at me. We'll start with Sawbill Canoe Outfitters. This is a picture of the front of our store building. Up here, we're located 24 miles up the Sawbill Trail at the very end. The Sawbill Trail starts down in Tofty. We've been up here since 1957. That is a picture of my dad, Bill Hansen, on the left there, Frank Hansen, his dad, and my grandfather, and Mary Alice Hansen, my grandmother. So Frank and Mary Alice founded Sawbill in 1957. They came up here. They were both working as educators in the school systems in Minnesota and wanted to have a summer business up here. So they started Sawbill Canoe Outfitters. They ran it for many, many years. And then my parents, Bill and Cindy, took over from them and ran it for many, many years as well. That's actually Bill and his sister, Rana, who was up here. And then in that canoe, in that picture there is my parents, Bill and Cindy, before my time. That's them coming into the Alton to Sawbill Portage from the Alton side. So Bill and Cindy ran it for many years, and then my husband, Dan, and I decided that we would like to be outfitters. So we were living in Montana at the time, in Missoula. I'm an attorney. Dan is a chemist. He was working for a biotech startup company out there. And we just threw caution to the winds and sold our house and sold all our stuff, packed up our dog into a U-Haul and moved back to Minnesota. So there we are with Mary Alice. That's right before we got married and right before we came back to run Sawbill. So one question we get a lot now is what are Bill and Cindy doing? A lot of people remember them from their trips up here, and Bill and Cindy are, sort of retired. They both are still doing other things, but they did move to Grand Marais. So they're about an hour away, and their favorite job now is being grandparents. So that's Bill and Cindy in that picture with my daughter, Kit. So they help out quite a lot with childcare. Cindy also works at North House Folk School now part-time, as does Bill. Bill captains the Yortis there. And Bill joined the Peace Corps until the pandemic hit. So he was spending some time in Uganda working with farmers there. So they're both still doing interesting things, but they're not around Sawbill as much anymore. So that's my husband, Dan, in his orange vest there last fall, hiking with both of our kids. We have a 5-year-old, about to be 5 in a few days. Her name is Kit, and we have a 2.5-year-old named Sig, and that's Sig and I right there. He's named after Sigurd Olson, the writer. So it's a busy time up here at Sawbill. We've got our 2 littles, and we run this outfitter. We feel very privileged and very honored to be, the 3rd generation running this business. There's just a lot of history up here, and we love it. It's a really interesting, fun lifestyle choice. One that I was really familiar with, but Dan was not so much when we moved up here. He had worked at Sawbill as a crew member before, but he's from New Mexico originally. So he was a transplant to Minnesota. These are our kids, Kit on the left and Sig on the right. They've both been paddling from very early ages, as you can see. These pictures are both from overnight Boundary Waters trips that we took with them when they were really little. So it's really fun to be able to do that with our family and help other families do that kind of thing too. So we really love that. One question that we get a lot is, what do we do in the winter time? So Sawbill is a seasonal business. We're only open in the summer. And in the winter we close. And so this is a picture of the front of our store, kind of midwinter. We do live here year round. Dan and I do. And we have some staff that overwinter with us too, but most people are seasonal. So in the winter, it's definitely a different atmosphere and a different flow up here. So it's much quieter. We get a lot of snow. The lakes, totally freeze over. And we still work, we're still answering the phones and emails and helping people, plan for next year. We work on some of the equipment, work on some canoes, fix things up, make plans for next year, but we also take a lot of time to play. So we do a lot of cross-country skiing, a little bit of traveling. We explore, our local trails and the wilderness in the winter, which is a really interesting time to see the wilderness that a lot of people don't experience. So it's a very different scene, and it's very quiet and a little lonely. We don't get a lot of visitors in the winter, so it's a it's a definite boomer bust cycle. You know, we've got lots of people up here in August, and it's fun and it's vibrant, and we're visiting with lots and lots of different people, and that's really interesting. And then in the winter, it's real quiet and it's just us. So it's a fun cycle every year that we really enjoy. There we are hiking out on the lake. So that's Sawbill Lake in the winter and what it kind of looks like. And there's Dan and Sig when he was really little, all bundled up and out exploring. And some hot cocoa on the lake, you know, fun stuff like that. So that's another picture of Sawbill from the south end looking north on the right-hand side there with Kit all bundled up. This is a picture of our old canoe storage building. So another question that people ask is like, what do we do with all of our canoes? So we do store our canoes, our Kevlar canoes inside in the wintertime. We used to have a big geodesic dome. A lot of people will remember that from visiting up here. We did end up tearing the dome down and replacing it with a new rectangular storage building, which works much better. We store all of our canoes up on end like this though. They take up less space that way. So it's former Sawbill crew Krista bringing a canoe into the dome, and you can see it's pretty tight quarters and squished in there. But we do that because they can't bear the weight of the snow over winter. It would crush them. So we have to put them all inside. Here we are. That's Dan and Kit going on a trip. Something else people ask a lot about is, you know, do we get to go on trips? Do we get to experience the boundary waters in the summer because we're so busy working? And the answer is yes, although maybe not as much as we would like to. Although part of that is because we have very little kids right now. So we do get to go out on trips. It's often more short notice. You know, we don't plan as far in advance, but we sneak out when we can. You know, when we've got staffing and when things are quieter, and with our kids, we have the privileged ability to be able to wait until it's like really good weather, and we can sneak out when it works best for them. So that's Dan and Kit and Huckleberry. They went on a trip, just the three of them last year. They went up to Wine Lake. They did what we call the Lugenita portage. It's a 480 rod portage, just north of Sawbill here. So it's kind of that portage is one that lots of Sawbill crew will do as sort of a rite of passage to go up on a trip to Wine. So Kit has grown up hearing people talk about that, and she wanted to have a turn. So that was her choice, and she carried her own pack, and they did it and had a great time. So here's our new canoe storage building. This is sort of this is a little video. This is how we take our canoes down out of storage at the end of the season, or at the end of the winter, I mean, to get spring. So we'll be doing this here in a couple of days now. That's Dan pulling the canoe down. He's really good at it because he does it a lot. So it looks very smooth when he does it, but you can slide them down like that until you get to a good balance point in the middle, and then out they go into our canoe yard. So like I said, we'll be putting those out any day now here. We got a little bit of snow last week, so we haven't pulled them out just yet because we want to wait till we're past the big snowstorms. So that's the old dome. The rectangular storage building sits on that same spot now, but that's a line of canoes going in the fall at the end of the season. We got to put them all away and pull them all back out again. So that's one of the big seasonal tasks. A lot of the things that we do around here are really tied to the seasons and the weather. You know, we pick good weather days to do these kinds of projects as best we can. So it's a fun way to get up every morning and go to work and have the natural world and the weather sort of dictate, you know, what you do that day. Video. This is our crew washing canoes. So some jobs don't get to wait until there's nice weather. So here's our staff washing canoes in an absolute downpour. I'm not sure that rain jacket is doing a whole lot there. But there's a lot of work that goes into running an outfitter. So a lot of cleaning. There's a lot of cleaning of gear. There's a lot of cleaning of canoes. We high pressure wash, as you can see, all of our canoes when they come back, whether they've been out for a week or a day, everything gets washed down and put back on the rack again. So that's kind of happening on an ongoing basis. We wash all the gear in a variety of ways, but a lot of high pressure washers up here. So that's washing the canoes. We see a lot of interesting wildlife up here. That is a photo of the canoe launch on Sawbill Lake. You can see the dock kind of in that picture. Northern lights, we see those more than your average person. I think they're out pretty frequently, which is a really cool experience to see. This photo does a good job. You see a lot of photos of northern lights online that are like really vibrant with bright reds and stuff. And oftentimes that you can't see that to the naked eye. This photo is pretty bright too, but it's a little bit more representative of what they actually look like in person. But then of course, there's a lot of movement too. They move a lot, which is really cool and unique. So that's a fun thing. There's often a pair of nesting loons on the south end of Sawbill. So we see little loon chicks more years than not up here. We heard the first loon last week, so they're back. That's the Milky Way on the south end of Saubel. So really great starry nights. The Boundary Waters is a designated dark sky space, which is really cool. So we see just really beautiful stars a lot and try not to take that for granted. The picture on the right there are 2 wolf pups that I came across in the area in the Superior National Forest near Sawbill last fall. So I came across a whole wolf pack when I was driving my kids down to the grocery store. So yes, we live far away from the grocery store. It's about 60 miles to get to Grand Marais and the grocery shopping here, but it's a really pretty commute. So we have to drive long distances to do stuff, but we get to see things like wolf packs along the way, which is really cool. Some more wildlife shots. This is a variety of pictures taken from staff and visitors up here. So lots of moose in the area, which is really cool. We see more sign of them probably in the winter just because you can see their tracks in the snow. So it's easier to spot where they've been. But certainly in the summertime, we see them a lot too. A lot on the road, driving up and down the Sawbill Trail. You see them, but then also out in the wilderness. So that really big bull there, that picture was an exciting encounter that one of our staff had. He was out fly fishing and was on his way back to the car, bushwhacking through the woods, and it was the fall, and he heard the moose and turned around and saw that peeking out at him from the woods. So that is not a telephoto lens. He just snapped a picture quick and then started running. And he was running in his waders because he had been fly fishing in the river, and the moose chased him for a little ways and then thankfully gave up the chase. But that was a little bit close for comfort encounter that he had up here. But he was lucky to be able to scoot behind a tree, and the moose lost interest. So something to be aware of. Yeah, moose can definitely be aggressive, especially in the fall, really only in the fall. I mean, any time of year they're big and you want to, give them the space that they deserve. But in the fall during the rutting season, bull moose in particular can be pretty aggressive. So that was a surprise that he was not hoping to run into on that fishing trip that day. This is a video that I took from a car, speaking of on the Sawbill Trail. I saw this on the way home from dropping our daughter off at preschool in 2019. So these 2 moose I came across in an area that the Forest Service had recently thinned, and they had done that for a couple of reasons, for bark beetle, to prevent the spread of bark beetle, but also to increase moose habitat. So there you go. I have seen moose there a couple of times, so job well done. It seems to be working. But again, just an example of like, that's our long commute, but my kids, they're just reaching school age. They're going to go to school. Elementary school is down in Tofty, so it's about a half-an-hour drive for us to get them down there. The bus doesn't come up here, but lots of people drive a half an hour one way as a commute, but they don't get to see bull moose duking it out on the way to and from. So I try to keep that in perspective. So that's just a little like window into where we are and what it looks like. Our day-to-day, every day is really different up here, which is really part of the fun. So some days are big office days when we're inside and doing the bookkeeping and answering emails, and other days, my crew today is out working on getting the campground cleaned up for the season because it's nice out today. So yeah, that's a little bit about us and how long we've been here. So I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thanks. Yeah, and I want to save most of the time for questions. I just wanted to draw everyone's attention again to this presentation next week. And in 1 second, I will drop the link in the chat here. And then also wanted to mention that our big spring giving week is coming up May 1st through 11th. It's called Spring Forward MN, and that is, we have a $100,000 match opportunity. So if you give during that week, that'll really go towards, helping the fight to protect clean water and protect the boundary waters more broadly. And I will also kind of link that in a chat just in a minute here. But yeah, I will stop sharing my screen and kind of see what we have for questions here. And I'll just encourage people to keep entering their questions in the Q&A as we go. So let me see. I haven't had a chance to look through these just yet. I know somebody had emailed me earlier and was wondering how COVID-19 and how the pandemic have changed things for you, both in how you do your operations, maybe how busy it is, what impact that has had on you and your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly like everybody, we've had to roll with the punches. It was a little chaotic last year because we weren't sure for a while if the Boundary Waters was going to open or when or how. So that was tricky, but we altered our operations. I mean, the good news about outfitting is that a lot of that stuff is outside anyway. All of our canoes and gear, we just shifted our operations to doing as much outside as possible. And it went really well. We had a great season. We were busy, but we were able to get people safely into the Boundary Waters, provide education and orientation with gear to people as much or as little as they needed before they went out, and do so in a really safe manner for everybody and for our staff. So it was great. We're going to do something similar-ish this year. It'll be a little different. We'll take what we've learned. We know more. We know a lot more this year. The vaccines are changing the landscape for sure. So we'll have our physical buildings open this year. People can come inside wearing masks, and we'll still do all the canoe outfitting and things, have the option to do everything outside. So visitorship, obviously that's the big story right now. Visitorship is really up in the Boundary Waters, which is great. It's a good thing to have people come up and experience the wilderness and play in this, real gem that is in everybody's backyard in Minnesota. These are public lands. They belong to all of us, and it's great to see more people accessing those. We had a lot of first timers come last year, or a lot of first time and a long timers coming. So like maybe they came up as kids, but haven't been in 20 years. And we're coming back again. So that's really fun. That's like one of my favorite parts about this job, is talking with people who are new to it or unsure, haven't done it in a long time, or have maybe never been the trip leader. They've just gone with others and never had to do it themselves. I love talking to people about that kind of stuff. It's really cool. It's one of the most accessible wilderness areas in the world. You don't have to be like, a CrossFit trainer to access it. You don't have to have special climbing gear. It's easy to do comparatively. And there are no stupid questions. It's fun to talk to people about that kind of stuff. So I enjoyed that aspect last year, and we're seeing a lot of people coming back again this year that came for the first time. So it's great. It's up, it's busy, but I would encourage people to call and talk to outfitters if you're worried about the crowds, or you're worried about not being able to find a campsite. There's a lot of really helpful online resources to get you started in thinking about where you might want to go, but man, all the entry points in the Boundary Waters have something cool to offer. They're all unique and different in their own ways. Personally, I try to, check out a different entry point every season, just to go somewhere fun and new. But then you should call out for a general idea of when you want to go and what kind of trip you want to have, i.e. do you want a base camp? Do you want to move every day? Are you, is fishing your top priority? Are you more interested in like big open waters with the big vistas, or do you like the small creeks and like moosey habitat? If you have some of those general kinds of ideas of what your hopes are for that trip, call an outfitter, call any of us. We can give you the lowdown on, where are there available permits, and which ones might fit that type of trip that you're looking for, as well as advice about like travel patterns and, conditions change throughout the season. Like a beaver builds a dam somewhere and suddenly that, portage is now a pond. We can like keep you up to date on those kinds of things and help you far in advance of your trip, and then, stay in contact as your trip gets closer too. And we're all, that's what we like to do.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Exciting to see so many people, kind of newbies out in the Boundary Waters, and more folks getting involved. And there's some questions kind of along those lines too, wondering how you are supporting people and practicing like leave no trace, what conversations like that kind of look like with clients, and, you know, what people in the audience today should know kind of about, you know, how to really protect the boundary waters on a trip.
Yeah, totally. You know, we show the leave no trace permit video because we're a cooperator with the Forest Service. So we issue permits here in person on site. We've got a TV set up outside this year so that, again, we can have people spacing themselves out and being safe. And we'll show that video. We also talk with people a lot about it, especially anybody who's getting gear from us. We do a lot of chatting about it, but it's, I think one of the biggest problems that people run into is that they go in and they're just not prepared for some of those things. I think there's always the malicious bad actors, but that's a very, very small percentage of people, truly. I think it's more like somebody's going out for the first time, they get out there, they make coffee, and then they're like, oh, coffee grounds. What do I do with these? You know, like, how do I pack these back out? And if you didn't bring a plastic trash bag or you didn't bring a way to sort of like contain your trash, it just starts to get tricky. And that's, I think, where people run into some trouble. So really thinking through, you know, every aspect of your camp setup and, you know, how am I going to carry this back out, basically, is the big key. As you're putting it into your pack, think to yourself, like, how am I going to store this to get it back out again? So that's a helpful thing. But yeah, we talk to people a lot about that.
Yeah, that's great. I know that's very important to kind of maintaining the boundary waters as it is. It kind of along those lines of making sure people are bringing the right sort of thing. Somebody is asking if there is like a item that's the most often forgotten or something that people don't include in their packing list that they should bring.
Boy, that's hard to say. I feel like that it really varies from person to person. I've forgotten things on trips before. I forgot matches once. That was kind of rough. So, you know, I don't know if there's like one typical thing that people usually forget, but you know, having a good pair of like camp shoes to wear around your campsite, lots of layers in clothing. That's one thing I always recommend to people, like loose fitting layers, especially for like bugs. If you're going in a buggy time of year, people will show up and have your, you know, Lululemon leggings on or something, which are like great and comfortable and easy to travel in, but also mosquitoes can bite right through them. So a nice baggy pair of really fashionable like zip off pants that are quick dry are actually, you know, work better. So that's one thing. Yeah, just like loose baggy layers of clothing to bring along. That goes a long way. Yeah,
that's great. Just looking through some of these other questions that I see here, kind of in the gear side of things. Somebody is wondering about what technology or devices you use in the boundary waters or would suggest to people to use.
Yeah, we get that question a lot. I personally don't really take out anything. I just take a compass and a good old fashioned map, and usually have a backup map in my pack. I do have a Garmin InReach device, although I use it more in my car than I do on boundary waters trips because there's no cell service on the roads around here. So in the wintertime when nobody else is driving them and I have no way of getting a hold of anybody if I'm in the ditch, I have a Garmin. So that's a good option. You have to be really careful and know how to use them because if you accidentally set off an SOS signal in the boundary waters, you are triggering like a full-on rescue response. Like all the search and rescues are coming for you. We had somebody in the wilderness a couple of years ago triggered their SOS. They were up on Wine Lake and a Black Hawk helicopter from St. Paul flew in to evacuate them and they were fine. They didn't need it. So just being really sure that you know ahead of time exactly how that thing works, exactly how to, you know, check in and use it and where that SOS button is and how to not use it are really important. I often recommend to people, I think the only time you really should really consider taking something like that out is if you are traveling with somebody who has a medical condition that you think might need that kind of service, like they might need to get flown out, like somebody if they've got, you know, diabetes or epilepsy or something like that, where there's a high potential that they like might need that kind of a rescue. Otherwise, you know, if you twist your ankle, probably you don't need a Black Hawk helicopter to come get you. Probably you can, you know, have your group mates help muddle you out. And that's what you should do.
Great. Yeah. Looking through some of these other questions, a lot of people are wondering more about like the business end of things. Kimberly's asking how tight knit are the outfitters with one another? Do you help each other out? Do you share or communicate during the season.
Yeah, totally. It is a good congenial group of people. There's a definite community up on the end of the Gunflint Trail where there's a big concentration of outfitters, and then there's Ely, and there's a big concentration over there. We're kind of by ourselves in the middle at the end of the Sawbill Trail. We're not really like near anybody else. So we suffer a little bit from that, just being isolated. Like we aren't in either of those areas a lot, but I am certainly friends with lots of the other outfitters, and we chat a lot. More in the off season when we all have time. In season, we don't get together or talk too much because we're really busy. But yeah, there's a lot of, especially during COVID, there was a really great group. We got together and talked a lot about just processes, cleaning gear, staffing, how are we going to operate? And that was really, really helpful and great. So I appreciate all of my colleagues that way.
That's great. And then somebody kind of along those lines too is wondering, like, as you look to the future of your business, what are you worried about? Is there anything you see as a threat or kind of predictions that you have for that?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly try to keep a bead on what's going on with like proposed mining and just clean water and access to public lands. So I think, threats to clean water are ever present. They're ongoing. They have always been here. They will probably continue to always be there in some way. So that's really an ongoing issue and an ongoing fight. And it's something that's part of my daily life. I mean, our business relies 100% bar none on there being clean and pristine water in the wilderness. So I, support a lot of different organizations, including Friends of the Boundary Waters. I'm on the board for Water Legacy. We try to give back when and where we can. But it's just something that it takes a lot of constant work and constant support. And so we try to do our part, to the extent that we can.
Yeah. And thank you for doing that. I know it's so helpful for Friends of the Boundary Waters and other environmental organizations to have your perspective and have you in the fight as well. Another related kind of business question, somebody was wondering about the transition between generations of ownership of Saubel, how that has worked and what you've done to make that go smoothly.
Yeah, I think we're just really lucky. I don't know. We have a really great working relationship. We're a tight-knit family. It's gone, from my perspective, really smoothly. I think my parents are tuned in here. They can chime into the chat if they friendly, but it was great. Frank and Mary Alice set up a really wonderful culture around Sawbill, and it's not just my family. It extends to everybody who's ever worked at Sawbill. I saw Steve Hedman was commenting in there. He was one of the original staff back in the day, Steve and his wife Dee. But we are just a really tight-knit group and family. And so there's just a lot of support. There's just a ton of support from both our former staff, a lot of the families who have been visiting us. We have tons of people who have been coming for generations and generations of their family visiting too. And they become, friends and part of the network too. So we've been really just super lucky to have a ton of support. And, our entire business plan, Dan and I, is basically to not mess it up, right? I say that jokingly, but it's true. We are just sort of stewards of this thing that is larger than ourselves. And we feel super lucky to help, be that conduit and provide that access for people. And we just want to keep that going.
That's great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the person that asked that was saying that they've been coming to Saubel since the 50s. And so know some of that history as well. Yeah. I see somebody else asking, what are your top tips for first timers that people need to know before going out?
Oh gosh. I would say if you are somebody who has camped or has experienced car camping even, it's not a huge stretch to do a Boundary Waters trip. So a lot of camping skills cross over to Boundary Waters camping. And I'm telling people that a lot, I find, or people that have done a lot of backpacking. There are some canoe specific things that you need for canoe country, like a canoe. And sometimes the packs, backpacking packs can be a little bit cumbersome. So sometimes it's nice to have those short squat Duluth packs that fit nicely in a canoe. But tips, I would say, the route planning is often overwhelming for people who are going on their first trip because there are so many entry points, there are so many options, there's so many things that you can do. People get really hung up on how do I pick the right route for me. So that's a place where calling an outfitter is helpful. I would say identifying the things that you want to get out of a trip: swimming, fishing, sightseeing, name kind of your top priorities for what you're hoping for. and then talk to somebody that can guide you in sort of the right route. I don't think it's totally necessary to go with a guide for your first trip. Like I've said, the Boundary Waters is pretty accessible and pretty easy. Probably the biggest advice for route planning that I would say to somebody who is new is to keep it loose. So it's good to have a general idea of what you want to do and what route you want to do. But one of the beautiful things about the Boundary Waters is you don't have to set that route in stone before you go in. Some wilderness areas you do. You have to say, I'm going to stay on this site on this night, and you book it in advance. You know, that's not the case here. It's first come, first serve once you get out there. So, you know, keep it loose. If you have a really ambitious route planned and the weather is really crappy, you could put yourself in a dangerous situation by needing to travel when the travel conditions are bad. You know, build in a couple of buffer days here and there, or if you get to a really nice spot and you want to stay for a day or two, you know, do that. And just keep it flexible so that you have the ability to listen to yourself. You know, you'll know after the first day, like how far you went, how it was, and if you want to do that again the next day or not, and sort of take it day by day. And that's okay. And that's kind of part of the fun of a canoe trip too.
And somebody is asking along those lines if you do guided trips from Sawbill.
We don't actually. We don't do any guided trips. We do offer, I mean, we do everything from like, if you need to rent one thermarest from us, great. If you want a fully outfitted package with like all the gear and all the food, personalized service when you get here, we do that too. And we do everything in between. So it's really as much or as little as you need. And we will spend as much or as little time with you as you need to make you feel comfortable before you go in. So if you want to practice picking up the canoe and putting it down with us, like that's great. We'll practice that and we'll help you learn how to do it. If you've done 40 Boundary Waters trips and you're ready to roll, that's cool too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. There's a few just comments that I want to just kind of shout out here. Steve saying that he was one of the original hires as an outfitter. So thanks, Steve, for adding that comment in. And then somebody else saying that you should consider co-authoring a book, maybe with your dad, about the Saubel area. They suggested Growing Up Saubel as a title. So I don't know if you've thought about that at all. But
maybe someday, maybe once my kids are not toddlers anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm seeing kind of a category of questions about permits. Somebody wondering, like with the busier season last year and this year, if they need to be, how worried they need to be about not getting permits. And then also someone wondering about the cost of permits.
Yeah, so the permit fee is the same as it's been for the last couple of years. It's $16 per adult, that's 18 and over, $8 per anybody under 18. And then there's a one-time $6 reservation fee that the third-party reservation site takes. So Saubel, we don't charge anything for booking people's permits for you or for issuing them. It's just a service that we do. That fee is just one time. It's not per day or anything. So that's what they cost. I would say I am seeing more people planning farther in advance this year. So permits are booking up more quickly than they do typically. That said, there are still lots of permits available, but you might have to be a little bit more flexible about your route, you know, where you're putting in, what your entry point is, or what your entry date is. So to the extent that you have a couple options, that's helpful. But yeah, people are planning more in advance this year. Last year, it was really last minute. You could book things really last minute. And that was, I think, just due to stay-at-home orders and, you know, needing a negative test and, you know, can so-and-so go? And it was just a lot of really short notice trips happening. So this year, I think people are excited and they're planning farther in advance. So there are still permits to be had, but I would book, you know, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see Bob Tamman asked here if you ever have problems getting enough permits. And I think maybe that from a Saubel perspective.
Yeah, sure. Hi, Bob. So yeah, I mean, sometimes so outfitters don't get a special set of permits. I think that's a common misconception too. People call a lot and say, you know, permits are gone on recreation.gov, but do you have a special set that you get just for you? And we don't. Outfitters we pull from the same pool that everybody else does. We log on to recreation.gov and book permits just the same. So I don't have anything special. So there, you know, sometimes people have trouble getting permits. I haven't run into it a ton this year. Usually, you know, somebody will call and say, you know, I want a permit for June 19th or whatever. And we say, oh, they're full on Saubel that day, but there are some available for Homer. You know, let's talk about routes at Homer. Let's talk about these other options. And typically we find something that works for people. Or if not, they might have to go back to the drawing board and, look at different dates. But there's options, there's ways to get around it. So it hasn't been a huge issue yet.
Great, yeah. It looks like we're getting towards the end of time. I do have to end this at 12:45 so I can run over to our press conference in St. Paul. Maybe I'll choose one final question here. I see Paul is asking about the status of drinking water in the Sawbill chain of lakes. Would you recommend treating it? How clean is the water?
Yeah, that's a great question to end on before we go to a conference and talk about clean water. The water is very clean. It is very clean. So the things you're worried about are like Giardia, bacteria that can harm you, that kind of thing. Not a lot of pollutants up here at the moment. So I drink the water straight from the lakes. You want to be careful about where you gather it from. So you want to go on a decent sized lake, paddle away from shore, gather the water from just below the surface. And typically it's quite clear. There's not a lot of debris. And I've always done that, and I've not treated my water, and I, knock on wood, have never gotten sick. My husband, he's from the Southwest. He's a little more hinky about water, so he always treats it. He uses a SteriPen. Gravity filters are a good option. That's again to SteriPens work well if there's not a lot of particulate. It's a UV light that kills the bacteria. And some people use, filters that filter out particulate as well as bacteria. So you don't need to do a lot. It's pretty darn good. I wouldn't put iodine in it because it tastes really good. And iodine makes it taste funky. So it's boiling it is totally fine too. Some people just boil their water. So a variety of options, but it's pretty darn clean, which is one of the really, really cool parts about it.
Great. Yeah. Well, I am going to
answer. I know we have to run. Maya's got to go to this conference. I'd be happy to answer more questions from anybody. I know there's a lot that were in the Q&A that we didn't have time to get to, but you can always send me an email. It's just info@sawbill.com. Be happy to answer it. Call us anytime. We're up here. We're answering the phones. You can find us on our website is sawbill.com. And we'd be happy to answer any and all these questions. No question is a question.
Great. And I have been recording this session today, so that will go up on our YouTube page later this week. If people want to look back on anything, I can also send out a follow-up email that has that contact info and the website as well. Thank you so much, Claire, for a great presentation. This is super helpful. I know we had a lot of engagement, a lot of questions that got answered, and a lot more to go. So yeah, I would really encourage everyone to call Saubel and keep planning your trips, keep getting those questions answered. I did just put in the chat again the link to sign up for our presentation next week that will kind of dive into the meaning of today's court decision, as well as our link for the spring giving. And we'll just encourage everyone to go to our Facebook page at 1 o'clock today for the live stream of the press conference and get some more details about, what today's Supreme Court decision means for PolyMet and for us at Friends of the Boundary Waters. I think that'll be a really interesting place. Feel free to reach out to me as well with any questions. Hope everybody has a great afternoon, and thanks again, Claire. This was really, really awesome and really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks for all the questions. I look forward to following up with folks. Bye.
Bye-bye.